Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, comparing traditional versus next-gen edge security. This is going to be an awesome event. Thank you so much for joining us. On this EcoCast, you'll hear from Sequence Security, Sysdig, Illumio, Rapid7, and Wind River. This is an exciting new topic for us here at Actual Tech Media with some all-new presenters on the event today. So if you're interested in next-gen edge security, you're in the right place. As always, we want this to be an educational event here at Actual Tech Media. We're all former IT professionals. We know how tough it can be in the trenches of IT, and we are here to help solve your technology challenges, specifically around security today. We encourage your technology or your questions there in the questions panel, and we'll be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of today's expert presenters, so we need your questions. I'll be talking about our best question prize here in just a moment as well. We also have, of course, our Amazon $500 gift card prize. We have 3 of those gift cards today on the EcoCast as well. I'll talk about the requirements for those in just a moment. We encourage you to use the questions panel. I see many of you have already found that. Hello to everyone out there. Good morning, Scott, Ray, Chris, James, Von Santa, so many hellos and good mornings out there. Thank you so much for those. We love the Actual Tech Media audience, and we, of course, always appreciate your support. We also have some poll questions we'll be asking you during the event, and you can respond to those directly in the slides window. I'll be sharing the results of many of those live with you here on the event. We want this to be a social event as well. You can tweet directly from your console, and the hashtag for the EcoCast will be automatically appended when you use that Twitter widget at the bottom of your screen. I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event, and of course, we appreciate you sharing what you've learned and hopefully the goodness here about the Actual Tech Media EcoCast event. And then finally, resources. We have a number of handouts there in the Handouts tab, one different resource for each of today's expert presenters. We've got 4 presenters. There's 4 resources on there. I see a URL. I see 3 different PDF assets. I encourage you to download those and check those out for additional information. I mentioned that we have some prizes, as always, on the EcoCast. Today it is 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. You must be live in attendance to qualify. I'll be announcing the winners periodically during the event, and we will contact the prize winners via email after the event today. We also have our best question prize for 4 Amazon $50 gift cards. This is to hopefully help shake loose some prizes, if you will, or I'm sorry, some questions, if you will. So, if you have a question on your mind, you're thinking, gee, I'm not sure if I should ask that, go ahead and ask it. We want your questions. There's no dumb question out there. And every time you post a question, that enters you into the $50 gift card drawing. Again, 1 for each of our 4 different sessions on the event today. Prize winners will be selected by Actual Tech Media after the event. And you must still meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy, of course, as well. You'll find that prize policy there in the Handouts tab. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. Thank you in advance to anyone out there who chooses to donate their prize value to charity. Thanks to generous prize winners over the years, we have donated thousands of dollars to the charities that you see here on the screen. So if you win a prize and you want to help someone less fortunate, we would love to help you do that. We've also done this in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can download free educational IT books. I said free, and that's right. They are full-length ebooks. You can find a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club there in your Handouts tab as well. Tons of great educational ebooks are available for download there at gorilla.guide. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media. I'll be serving as the moderator. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow Actual Tech Media as well. And again, the hashtag for the event, if you tweet directly from the bottom of your console, is ATM EcoCast for the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. Before we jump into today's topic, I want to remind you to, of course, subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels on YouTube. Yes, we post all of these events on our YouTube channel. You can check out all the recordings of these events after the fact over on YouTube. I encourage you to subscribe there. You can do that in the top right-hand side of your audience console. Also, our Facebook page and our 10 on Tech podcast, that's over in the iTunes store. And of course, we post all of our latest and greatest content on LinkedIn. There is an icon there on the top right-hand side of your audience console to our LinkedIn page as well. And now, before I introduce you to today's keynote presenter, I want to talk just briefly for a moment about a new program that we've started here at Actual Tech Media. It's really just kicking off, and it's called the Actual Tech Media IT Reviewer Program. And, this program is where you can get paid to tell vendors what you think about their enterprise technology pitches. And we need your feedback. We need your help with this program. And it's a great way to, have another opportunity to win or earn an Actual Tech Media gift card. IT vendors approach us all the time to find out if their technology pitches, demos, marketing messages, and websites are hitting the mark with IT professionals such as yourselves. And so we want to help get you engaged with this. Our fantastic Actual Tech Media audience, we need your help. And so what we're doing here is we're building up a team of established IT professionals like you to provide respectful but honest and candid feedback to vendors on their technology demos and pitches. So if you'd like to become a reviewer and let vendors know if they're hitting the mark with their messages, whether it's educational or marketing, sign up here using the survey. You can click directly on the slides window there. That is a hyperlink that will open up a new browser tab or web page. You can also find the same link there at the top of the handouts tab. And as a thank you for your time in providing vendors with your feedback, if you're selected for this program, we'll be sharing $50 Amazon gift cards each time you participate in a feedback round. So the survey is just to become a reviewer, and then as we do reviews, then that's when you would provide your feedback and earn gift cards. So if you're interested, tell us a little bit about yourself on that survey link right there. And again, that's in the handouts tab, also in the slides window. And hopefully this is a fun way to share your experience, your expertise, and your opinions, and earn some gift cards in the process. So with that, it's time now to kick off the EcoCast here with our expert presenter. I'm excited to have a keynote from Corey Younger. She is an author, an analyst, and an evangelist in the area of security. You can find her on Twitter, SDN-Daughter. Her website is totalpackets.com. She's even provided her email address there, Corey@totalpackets.com. And we're about to bring Corey on right now. Let's see, here we go. We've got her. All right. Corey, take it away.
Intro, David. My name is Corey Younger. I am an independent security researcher and industry analyst, and you can find me on Twitter at SDN-Daughter. Today, we're going to be talking about securing your edge with next-gen security tools. But before we dive into some great demos from some vendors, let's talk about defining what exactly next-gen security is. Besides being a marketing buzz term, I think that the term next-gen actually does carry quite a bit of weight. So when I'm looking for a next-gen security solution, I'm looking for three things: simplicity, visibility, and automation. With simplicity, I want to help ease the burden on our security staff. By combining multiple security solutions into a single pane of glass with a user-friendly interface, we're going to help enhance productivity and reduce alert fatigue. We can also reduce alert fatigue by reducing the amount of false positives and also categorizing and prioritizing our data, so that way our data is much easier to manage and we set our security staff up for success. With visibility, I'm looking to gain insight into what our data is telling us. So not only do I want our security solutions to provide us with a plethora of information, I want them to actually help control that narrative and generate a story for us. Whether it's a supervised or unsupervised machine learning algorithm, that algorithm is going to do a few things for us. Not only is it going to gain insight into how our environment is acting and be able to detect patterns and behavior, but it's also going to help us establish that baseline and an image of what normal for our environment should look like. With automation, I'm looking to utilize some of that rich data that we now have about our environment. I want automation to help us assist in policy creation, implementation, and enforcement. We can also automate certain security responses, such as automatically containing a threat. This can help reduce lateral movement and significantly reduce the blow of an attack. Now that we know what we're looking for and we're looking at a next-gen security solution, let's take a look at how it compares to our traditional edge security. So much like our traditional edge security, our next-gen solutions are still going to be logging, reporting, and enforcing policy. But now our security solutions are smarter and they're helping prepare us for the future instead of just reacting to what's happening now. Now we get proactive next-gen security. We're also going to be helping adapt to our increasingly more remote workforce by having more cloud-based operations that enables our security team to work from wherever. This is going to enable us to test, run, secure, and monitor applications from anywhere and anytime. Next-gen security solutions are also going to help us with the tasks that mean the most to our business, such as compliance validation. Another thing that I'm seeing in a lot of next-gen security solutions is agile policy enforcement. So while we're managing everything from that single pane of glass, if we have one policy that we're going to push up to multiple platforms, we're going to be able to do that with one simple click of a button instead of having to waste time doing redundant tasks. Intelligent alerting is going to help us prioritize the risks that pose the greatest threat to our environment. And that automation piece that we talked about earlier is going to help us automate the responses to risks that we choose. For example, containment is going to allow us to automatically contain a risk of a certain level, which is going to help reduce east-west movement. Now, of course, we know security comes in layers for a reason. There is no magic tool that does it all. So here are just a few things that I want to ensure that my edge stack has. It really does take an army, guys. So I want to make sure we maintain a zero trust segmentation architecture. So never allow, always ask with those endpoints. I want a next-gen intrusion prevention system. I want a next-gen firewall that's going to do packet filtering and deep packet inspection. I want unified container and cloud threat detection to help secure our Kubernetes workloads. I want a reliable real-time operating system. I want a secure DevOps platform. And better yet, I want that DevOps platform to operate in the cloud so that way my employees can work from anywhere. I want EDR and vulnerability management, and I don't want just any EDR and vulnerability management. I want that vulnerability management system to be tying into CVEs so I have the best of the best data there is. Now you're saying, all right, Corey, I know what a next-gen security tool is. I know the difference. I know what I need to include in my stack, but how do I find the right one? There are so many security vendors out there. Well, don't worry. It's all going to start with knowing your organization's environment. Second, shop around. I love VARs. Talk to a VAR that has a dedicated security team. Oftentimes, you can find great experts at resellers who really want to help you solve your security problems, no matter which tools you use. Now, you've bought your tools, you've implemented them, but it is so important to ensure that users are using products correctly. A blender isn't going to do us any good if we don't plug it in. So don't be afraid to lean on a vendor's technical team for support. I can assure you that they want you to use their products to the full extent just as much as you do. And lastly, repeat. Your organization's security needs are constantly going to be changing. So repeat this process. I know that we all get comfortable with one vendor, but as our needs change, our vendor needs may change as well. Thank you guys so much for taking some time with me today. Again, my name is Corey Younger. I'm on Twitter at SDNDaughter. You can find my latest work at totalpackets.com, and you can also reach me at corey@totalpackets.com. Please feel free to connect on LinkedIn, connect on Twitter. I would love to continue this conversation later. And you guys are in great hands for the rest of this webinar.
All right. Thanks so much, Corey. Really appreciate that. A fascinating presentation there on next-gen security and the difference between traditional versus next-gen edge security. Of course, that is today's topic, and we appreciate your expert advice on it. I've just brought up a poll question for everyone out there in the audience. I know all of you are working hard to secure your IT organizations, especially, edge locations. And so the poll question on the screen, the first of a few that we'll do during the event today, is what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT security solutions at your company, like the ones that you'll be learning about on the EcoCast today? So I'll leave that up for a moment and allow everyone to respond to that. And then right after this, I'll be introducing you to our first presenter. All right. Thank you, everyone, for the responses there to the poll. We appreciate your feedback. And with that, it's time to kick off the EcoCast with our first presenter. I'm excited to introduce you to Mr. Jeremy Snyder, Senior Director for Corporate Development at Rapid7. Jeremy, are you there?
I am.
All right. Take it away, Jeremy.
Okay, great. I hope everyone's able to hear me. So my name is Jeremy Snyder. I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Development. Very happy to be here today. I'm going to be talking about, kind of the theme of today's session, talking about the shift towards the next generation and what does that mean. Specifically today, what I wanted to talk about was kind of next generation edge security. And I think edge is really an interesting topic to talk about because, quite frankly, we all know that the world has shifted. And I'm going to try to bring a little bit of a different perspective to the conversation from some of my own background experience. And so just about a couple words about my background experience. I think that the most interesting thing is that I actually come from an IT practitioner background. And, for the first 12 years of my career, I worked hands-on keyboard. I ran data centers for SaaS companies around the world. And of course, security was a big part of the focus while we were in, SaaS environments because we held our customers' data in our environments. But then starting back in 2010, I made a shift over to public cloud. I worked for one of the big three cloud vendors. You can see it there quickly. But, it was a really fascinating change to make. And I think there was a lot that I learned along that journey. But one of the things in particular that I learned was that I myself personally never, ever, ever want to touch a piece of hardware again on the server side or on the data center side. But that transition brings with it a whole load of complexity that I'm sure we're all feeling painfully firsthand right now. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of the experiences that we're going through and what they mean and what they imply for our edge security. So I know it's kind of cliche by now. This is the world that we all live in. This is unfortunately the state of things. Knock on wood, hopefully not for much longer for those of you joining from places where the vaccine rollout is going really well. And for others joining from other locations, I can only say, I'm sorry, hang in, stay strong. It'll get there hopefully soon enough. But we're all living in this world where, remote work is the primary mode of working, and we've got employees working from wherever they're working from. That is likely from their home, but we've seen cases of people who have actually thrown themselves into remote work in weird ways, like working from hotel rooms, from cross-country road trips because they couldn't take it being at home anymore, to those that are literally going off-grid and working from cabins in the woods because that's where they feel comfortable and most productive. So all of this has actually led to dramatic growth in the cloud. If we talk about the cloud, we're going to get into a couple different flavors of the cloud in just a few minutes. But if we talk about the cloud, I mean, it's no exaggeration to say that the cloud was already growing at a really staggering pace. You can look here and you can see some of these stats. Just a couple I'll highlight. I mean, the cloud now represents, over $100 billion a year easily. Many hundreds of billions of dollars if you put together all of the major cloud vendors from, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service around the world. And it already was experiencing, kind of a 20% year over year growth rate. So, think about that, and it compounds over time. So we know that it's growth upon growth as we go, and that's been the case for several years now. I did see a stat recently, these numbers came from right around the end of last year, but I did see a stat recently that estimates we are getting close to 50% of all kind of internet workloads being on public cloud now. as opposed to being in, private data centers or co-location facilities. But of course, the current situation under COVID-19 has dramatically impacted that and accelerated even more. So on top of the growth that we were already experiencing, we're now moving from, organizations having to go from 50% of online transactions up to 90 or even higher numbers of online transactions. I know for some of my favorite spots where I live, restaurants will not take orders even for takeout any way other than online. So, it's real easy to find those cases anywhere around the world. And if we look at kind of, the quarterly growth rate that had been at 18%, we're now seeing a 37% on top of that. So if you just do the numbers real quick, you get to a growth rate that is kind of in the range of, accelerated growth on a year-over-year basis, and probably set to continue, as one of the things that is going to happen is that teams get more used to this environment, and as our development and IT skills really kind of level up to this cloud environment. So what does that mean for us in terms of next generation or next gen edge security? Well, let's talk for a couple minutes about, what's different in cloud environments. When I ran data centers, and granted it's been, 12 years or so since I stopped running data centers, we really focused on kind of two main solutions for kind of defensive security, let's say for our security posture. The primary one was our firewalls. Our firewalls were, literally our first line of defense, but they were also the line of defense that we put the most time, effort, money, and trust into. And a lot of our focus was on keeping bad actors out of our networks, with the idea being that, hey, if they can never get in, then, we're good. Behind that firewall, almost everything was open. So if anyone ever did make it through the firewall, got onto one of our boxes, they had pretty broad access to other systems within the network. And then secondarily, we just protected the endpoints. And we primarily did that with endpoint agents. Again, this is dating myself a little bit, but in those days, we were primarily looking at, kind of antivirus/anti-malware. Those were really kind of the key problem areas when it came to endpoint protection. So that's, the old world, if you will. That's kind of where things came from. And that's well and good. But when we think about cloud environments, we see a dramatically different picture. So what I did here is I grabbed one of the reference architectures off of the Amazon Web Services website. This is a public-facing kind of multi-tier web application, kind of classic three-tier architecture. I know it may be a little bit hard to see on the slides on the screens, but you can very easily go out and find the same thing on the AWS website for yourself and many, many others. But there's a number of things that I think are really interesting around this. I talk to a lot of security practitioners in the cloud environment, and one of the things I like to do is throw an architecture like this up on the screen and poll the audience. And I silly me, should have thought about doing it here with all of you today. But the question I always ask is, how many security controls are in this simple configuration? How many different configurations or settings do we need to think about from a security perspective? And I usually give them ranges, 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and so on. This one has well over 20 security controls. And I also like to give the example that, in an AWS environment or any cloud environment, I pick on AWS because it's the vendor I know the most, but in any cloud environment, the question of where the perimeter is actually a very difficult one to answer. And I give the example, if we go back to that traditional data center setting, it's really hard for me to have a firewall, have a DMZ, have private subnets, have backups behind those subnets, run everything, behind the DMZ privately, keep that all secure and private, and then take one backup on one tape in my backup tape drive and make that public. And yet that's something I can very easily do with the single configuration on a public cloud platform, right? And so that perimeter that we think about, in this diagram, you can see that there are actually subnets, there are network, kind of edge layers defined there. There are things like, route tables, load balancers, security groups, et cetera, each of which serves one layer of function within the network topography. But then, like I said, it's very easy for me to take one asset sitting behind all of those layers and make it public with the flip of a switch. So that question around perimeter-oriented thinking around, the edge being really out at the edge of the network, that's no longer the case. There are many, many assets in public cloud environments where the edge is on the asset itself, which is to say the piece of kind of infrastructure resource that you're using or consuming in that cloud environment. The other thing that I think is happening that may steer a little bit of a shift away from endpoint protection and thinking about that as being one of the key components in our next generation security approach is the rise of ephemeral endpoints. Now, this is something that has been a practice within public cloud for a long time, but I think the analogy started to get more broad adoption starting in about 2016. So at one of the Amazon keynotes, this concept of pets versus cattle and cattle versus the herd was raised or was presented. And for those that aren't familiar with it, I'll just kind of go over it quickly. But effectively what it means is, when you have servers and you name them, you treat problems with those servers, you take care of them, you log into them, you patch them, you update them, you upgrade them, you install new pieces of software interactively inside the operating system layer. And when there's a problem with that server, you go troubleshoot it on that server. When you have cattle, you number them. If there is a problem with a individual member or an individual cattle, you don't go onto that server and take care of it, right? Instead, you replace it with another one that serves the same needs. And this is something that is achieved with a few clicks and about 3 minutes on a public cloud platform, whichever vendor you're using. And that's a dramatic change. And when we talk to some of the leading cloud adopting or cloud native companies today, companies that are running tens of thousands of virtual machines, we ask them, what's the average life cycle of those virtual machines? It's a question of days, right? These virtual machines are used to run a particular workload. They spin up, they serve their purpose, and then after some time, they're no longer usable, or they have issues, they're outdated, they need to be patched, et cetera. But again, instead of going through that patching interactively on those virtual machines, they blow them away. And so I asked the security practitioners at these organizations, well, what do you think about endpoints? And they say, yeah, we're reaching a point where the trade-off between the overhead of managing endpoints on endpoint agents on ephemeral virtual machines, that management overhead is greater than the benefit from having the endpoint agent. And in addition to this, something I didn't include here, but probably should have, we're seeing a rise in platform as a service offerings that actually remove the underlying operating system. So for those of you who might be more familiar with public cloud platforms, we're seeing things like serverless technologies, containerization, and Kubernetes. And in those environments, you don't even have access to the underlying operating system in order to install an endpoint agent. So that's another reason why I think relying on endpoints as a key part of your strategy moving forward, is something that definitely still has some applicability, but maybe a declining strategy in favor of thinking about protection of different types of infrastructure components within these public cloud environments. And then the other thing that I think is really a big factor in kind of thinking about, next generation, again, in the context of the world we live in today, is data outside your walls. In the past, we had full control over all the data that our employees were using. We ran our CRM system internally. We ran our email system internally. We ran our file server internally. And I think it's probably been about 6 years since I worked at an organization that had any of those things internally, maybe even longer if I think about it. I've not worked at a company that ran its own email server instead of using, Office 365, hosted Exchange, or Gmail. Similarly, I've not worked for a company that ran a file server instead of using, Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, again, Office 365, for many years. And I think that's the reality of the world. And again, there was a dramatic acceleration on the adoption of those platforms. And we can see here from the stats here that there's been a 164% increase in SaaS adoption, including those key categories of things like, email, productivity tools, Office Suite, et cetera. What are the risks that come along with that? I think one of the main things, though, is really just in the title of this. You have key data outside your walls. So the access to that data, the governance of that data, having visibility, like Corey talked about, is so crucial. Knowing what data is being consumed by users within your organization or being worked with by users in your organization is one of the most fundamental things that we as security professionals need. And it can be very challenging for us to understand, these platforms are often really easy to adapt. They're not a major investment, not a major infrastructure investment that would have had to go through IT in the old world. Instead, in this kind of next generation of IT context, you can have a situation as simple as, an individual manager within one team who pulls out a credit card, signs them up for who knows what SaaS solution that they're using. And again, you've got corporate data now living within, that environment. So those kind of factors together, I think, really position to me some of the context. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about some of the things that I think are most important from the public cloud world that I mostly come from. So bear with me, and hopefully this will all make sense to you. I think one of the main things that I would really stress for all of you, and again, I apologize for forgetting to include a slide on this, is the shared responsibility model. I think there is an overcorrection that is something that is easy for us as security professionals to kind of lean into, which is that we go from thinking we have to control everything when it's within our walls to thinking that we don't control anything when it's not inside our walls. And a lot of the times, frankly, I will say that the messaging coming from the vendors in the cloud world is confusing. And they give the impression that because they have good security practices, good hygiene, good processes, good documentation, audit, et cetera, for how they operate as an organization, that all of that automatically applies to you as a customer of their cloud platform. One of the things I think is really important to understand is if you look at that shared responsibility model, you will find that that is true for them in their offering. And the way I like to talk about it is kind of the way I talked about it when I worked at one of the cloud vendors, which is the vendors are responsible for the security of the cloud, but you as the customer are responsible for your own data security in the cloud. And there are two key pieces, right? One is, of course, the data itself, but the second is the employee access. If you think for a second about the distributed world, the distributed workforce that we have right now, that in many ways is the edge, right? That is, we know that humans have always been the weakest chain in our security structures. And similarly, we know that, 95% of cloud data breaches are actually the fault of the customer. The other 5%, by the way, are active hacking. Those are things where hackers exploited a vulnerability or an application weakness or what have you in order, but they're active attacks as opposed to the majority, 95%, which are really, frankly, most of them are customers' mistakes and leaving data open to the world. There's a great report that we've got on that. For those that are interested, look for the Rapid7 2020 State of Cloud Security report, and you'll be able to find that. With this transition to the cloud, I think one of the downsides around this is that we are seeing more and more data breaches. So that number has actually risen almost 50% year over year for the last couple of years. And, in some of our surveys, we have found that 75% or more of cloud customers have had these security misconfigurations that accidentally expose their data to the world. And then we've also found that, that shift that I talked about to ephemeral endpoints, that's the leading edge, right? That's maybe the top 20% of cloud customers. So when you think about your own security strategy for your cloud adoption and for, your transition to remote work and to a next generation IT construct, think about your own org and your own kind of operations modality. Are you a forward-thinking organization that's going to leap into more ephemeral, virtual machines as server backend? Are you going to jump straight towards, a next generation platform like Kubernetes where you don't have an operating system? Or do you need to think about implementing some of the same practices you're doing today around things like vulnerability management, et cetera, and bring that over? And then last but not least, for those that work in regulated industries, I think one of the most interesting things is understand the implications of business associate agreements that you might be signing with your vendors and what that might mean for your compliance chain and what that might mean, again, for kind of delineating the line between your responsibility and the shared responsibility of the vendor that you're working with. And then if I wanted to pick a few particular areas to focus for those that are in the process of adopting public cloud infrastructure as a service offerings, IaaS, I wanted to highlight where some of the key problems have been. So for those of you using AWS, S3 is notoriously the place where customers make the most frequent mistakes. And it, again, comes down to misconfiguring S3 buckets that accidentally allow public access. There's many layers of security controls and security configurations on S3, everything from public-private switches to bucket policies, IP allow and deny lists, et cetera. But the other big categories are, of course, like services that are similar to S3 on other vendors, so things like Azure Blob Storage I highlighted there. And then the next generation databases are a particular area of concern. On the one hand, they are super flexible. They are very, very powerful. They allow customers to work with, kind of new types and new volumes of data that are really unprecedented, which was all fantastic and powerful. But sometimes they sacrifice security in the name of convenience, ease of use, ease of deployment. And so just be aware of that. Make sure that you are implementing security controls when your teams are standing up things like Elasticsearch, MongoDB, et cetera. And then, of course, last but not least, thinking about the shared responsibility model, think holistically. And I'm actually going to jump ahead. I know I'm coming up to time, so I want to kind of get through a couple things. So think about that shared responsibility model. What I tried to do here was outline kind of an infrastructure stack view working from the cloud provider up. In all models, the cloud provider is responsible for their own physical infrastructure security and their hypervisor layer. In infrastructure as a service, your responsibility as a customer kicks in at that network layer and above. In things that are more platform as a service oriented, it kicks in at the identity layer and above. And in things that are like pure SaaS, typically it kicks in at that application and data layer, but identity again becomes part of it. So what of those components will represent an edge for you as you look into adopting these cloud solutions? That is where you are. And hopefully that it provides a little bit of guidance and thinking towards your own journeys. And for those that are interested, just real quick to go through Rapid7, we are a platform-oriented security company in the cloud space with a whole unified model around different insights that we pull together across different layers, everything from vulnerability management, application security, et cetera. For those that don't know, InsightVM is one of the absolute world leaders in vulnerability management, but we've got a number of other solutions in the SIEM space, and of course in cloud security posture management, which is where I have been spending most of my time, as you probably can gather, and then application security, and finally in security automation and orchestrated response. And with that, I think I've come to pretty much the end of my time. I don't know if there's time for any questions that have come in, but there are also some links here for those that are interested in maybe learning more about Rapid7 solutions or in getting a free 30-day trial of any of those products for yourselves. And with that, I will thank you all very much for your time, and let me go check on Q&A and see if there is anything.
Absolutely, yeah. We do have some questions for you, Jeremy. Great presentation, by the way. This is fascinating stuff. I'm going to bring up a poll question for everyone out there. While we do our question and answer session here, I want to call everyone's attention to the poll on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Rapid7 solution? And by the questions, I can tell, obviously, there's a lot of interest in this. So, Jeremy, first question I wanted to ask you is, it's around what kind of reporting capabilities does the Insight platform have?
Yeah, it's a good question. Very specific on the Insight platform. It varies a little bit depending on the feature area, but I think one of the key things that I would stress on all of them is that we're very focused on actually a lot of the things that Corey said, which is really unified visibility. So reporting around, vulnerability management, around incident response, around cloud security, the reporting capabilities that we bring are always focused on a unified view of everything, right? So bring all of the data together, everything that we have visibility into one location. Now, you may choose as the customer to filter them down, but typically what you're going to find is kind of two flavors with that, broad view. One is kind of point in time compared to, common problems or common standards. And the second one is going to be more of a time series and helping customers understand, really, are you getting better over time? Because one thing we really like to make sure is that our customers are actually getting, they're really improving their security posture as a result of using our platform.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And then another question here about cloud migration. They ask, what advice would you give organizations who've started migrating or are getting ready to double down on their cloud migration efforts?
Yeah, great question. And we get this one quite a lot. And the thing that I always try to recommend here is first, don't leave security into the last minute. Make sure that security considerations are part of what you're doing as you go. Second, you don't have to solve all problems as you go through the, initial phases of migration. One of the things that I like to suggest to people is look for something called the AWS CIS benchmark foundation benchmark, and it's a very simplified framework of 40 rules around security. It's very easy to check. Look, it's simple enough that you can audit it, kind of manually, or you can even audit it more spreadsheet style. It's not like a complex matrix of 400 controls or anything like that. It's 40 controls. You can audit it on an account by account basis, or of course there are tools that will automate this audit for you. But it's built around, best practices and good, strong policies that cover a lot of the basics. If you go through that, it will cover all of those leading candidates for where customers make mistakes on their configurations. All of those are covered in that framework. So I think that's really where I would recommend people start.
Excellent. Yeah, good advice. And then when it comes to cloud security specifically, this question, they're just asking if you have any kind of general advice.
Look, I think thinking holistically is a really, really smart thing, but I think that is often kind of like an aspiration, move towards that over time. Like with anything, start with basics, start with gaining visibility into your cloud environments, start with making sure that that's not one-time visibility. I think one of the other key changes that, I kind of hinted at, talking about ephemeral virtual machines and so on, but cloud will change much more frequently than your traditional infrastructure will. And so that when you gain that visibility and you start to do that inspection, maybe you use that CIS benchmark I talked about, make sure that is not kind of a periodic audit type of activity. Make sure that is more continuous, daily, or even, really kind of automated in hour by hour or minute by minute even. So just be aware, cloud changes much more rapidly. Shift your thinking to make sure that you're ready to accommodate for that. And then, move towards a holistic end state as a goal.
Excellent. Yeah, good advice. And then I know we're running out of time here in our live Q&A. Let me just bring up this slide. The last question I wanted to make sure I ask you is if folks want to get started with the Rapid7 solution, what do you recommend? Is it the 30-day free trial?
Yeah, absolutely. And, as part of that process, or for those that don't like, personal interaction, and I know a lot of security practitioners don't, the demo videos are a great place to start. But for those that, are ready to really kind of kick it off and get your own hands dirty on your own environment, we offer free 30-day trials on all of our products, and that's really a great place to start. Excellent.
All right. Well, a great presentation. I really appreciate you being on today. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
My pleasure.
And I should point out, there's 30 more questions still available there in the queue for you to hopefully try to get back to some of those folks. Obviously, a lot of interest and excitement around this, so thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. And with that, we can go ahead and, I guess, move on to our next presentation. We're going to keep this EcoCast moving. A lot of great content, a lot of great presentations coming up. And this one is one I'm looking forward to as well. I'm excited now to bring on our next presenter. Welcome, Mr. Matt Kyle, Director of Product Marketing at Sequence Security. Matt, are you there?
I am. Thanks very much for having me.
Great to have you on again, Matt. Take it away.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. All right. Previous, next. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Today we're going to talk about, in keeping with the spirit of comparing traditional versus next-gen security at the edge, we're going to talk about bot prevention. So when I talk about bots, I am talking about automated bots that take over accounts or come away with PS5, highly coveted PS5 or sneakers or Xboxes at Christmas time. We heard about them at the last holidays. They called them Grinch bots. So the premise of today's chat will be how traditional bot prevention offerings that require JavaScript or an SDK are compared to those that rely solely on ML and AI to perform the metrics collection that will determine whether the intent of the transaction is legitimate or malicious. So that is what we're going to do today. Hopefully you've scanned through the premise of today's chat, and I'm going to move to the next slide. So before we get started, the quick commercial on the company. About 5 years old, focused on application security. We are currently protecting truly billions of transactions daily in the verticals that you see there, FinServ, retail, social media, and dating, where romance scams are all the rage. It's a Kubernetes-based application, so it can be deployed at the edge in the data center, and we do have a SaaS offering as well. So very flexible deployment options to address any possible data privacy issues or architecture issues. Leadership from Palo Alto Networks, Zscaler, and Symantec, and then you see our three venture-backed VCs there on the bottom. Okay, so how does a bot? What am I talking about here? Here's how a bot might work. They're going to find the target, whether it's the Adidas sneakers being sold by Foot Locker or the PS5 being sold by Best Buy. They're going to find the target. They're going to deconstruct the web page to see how it works. They might find an API or reverse engineer the mobile application. They're then going to create the attack. It wasn't too long ago where there was a lot of work required to create the attack. It would, lots of scripting or manual work, visiting the nether regions of the dark web. Now you can go and find bots as a service very easily, where you and I can just subscribe to the bots as a service and try and come away with our favorite sneakers or our PS5s. They are going to use predefined attack toolkits and target the APIs directly. APIs, as many of you may understand, is going directly to the database. They're going directly to the resources behind. They include the entire transaction, and they're stateless. So APIs really are spectacular tools for developers, but they are also spectacular tools for attackers. Then what happens? The attack is executed, right? They are going to take advantage of all of the user credentials that are flooding the web almost on a weekly basis. Residential IP proxies readily available for sale through a variety of vendors, and they're going to execute that attack. So that's how the bots work. In some cases, some folks will say that roughly 25% of the total traffic of the web is malicious bots. Obviously, there are good bots, Google bots that help improve search and so on, but there are a very large number of malicious bots. Now, how would I prevent it? So traditionally, I would purchase a security offering from perhaps one of the CDN vendors or one of the other traditional bot vendors. Those would be Shape Security, Akamai, Cloudflare, Fastly, so on. So what happens? So I get a JavaScript element. I have to build it into each one of my public-facing web applications. And when I talk about web applications, I'm talking about things like my shopping cart or the account registration or the account login. Those are what I term, and we in the industry term, the web applications or the APIs behind them. This is obviously going to have an impact on your development and QA cycles. Now, if you're an organization that has moved to a agile development methodology or a more iterative development methodology, the addition of third-party source code is going to mess with your release cycles. It's going to be very difficult to coordinate them and make sure that each release from the third-party vendor, say it's Shape or Akamai, is coordinated with your own release cycles. JavaScript, it slows websites down. So when you're in the retail industry and you're investing in page load optimization through your CDN, and then you add JavaScript to it, that's going to negate some of your benefits. And there are numerous resources out on the web where the prevention techniques being put forth by some of the traditional bot vendors are available in reverse engineered. So they can be bypassed by the attackers. Now, the move towards mobile and device requires similar efforts. You take an SDK, you build it into your mobile app, and you roll out the mobile app. Again, easily reverse engineered. In fact, that's where most of the attackers will focus now. They'll go download the app and reverse engineer it, decompile it, take a look at it, and figure out how it works. Now, the other challenge here is, some of us don't always keep their mobile app, the apps on our mobile device up to date, right? Particularly if you're not using it that often. So you might be on version 1 and they need to get you to version 2 to deliver the most recent version of the bot prevention. Well, you might not want to upgrade, or you're ignoring the upgrade, and so it requires you as the vendor to manage multiple versions of the mobile app or force a user to upgrade, neither of which are ideal. And then the last component is the APIs. APIs are really becoming the target of choice now. And as I mentioned earlier, APIs being stateless, including the entire transaction, they can't really be instrumented directly with a client or an SDK, right? There's nothing there to tie it to. So what sometimes will happen is the vendor will redirect an API that needs to be protected to a web page, oddly enough, and then that will inject a cookie, which then is used to collect telemetry. Very cumbersome for all parties involved, and the result really is an inconsistency in policy. So that's how you might try and protect it with traditional. Now, we take a different approach, and it's all ML, machine learning and artificial intelligence based. So traffic is redirected to our analytics engine, the CQI engine there in the middle, where it will apply roughly 200 different ML models and rules to the traffic to determine malicious versus legitimate intent. That decision is then given to the policy engine, and you can take action on that policy engine by blocking, geofencing, merely logging and monitoring, or deceiving the attacker. REST APIs allow you to import and export data to improve the findings or augment the analysis and augment the policies. You can export, obviously, to your favorite log analysis tools, reporting tools, those types of things. And really, the key here is that there's no JavaScript or SDK, so there's none of the impacts that I talked about earlier on your development teams and your QA cycles. All righty, rolling along. So we'll drill down into how the CQAI, the heart of the platform, works. Really 3 phases. We look at the traffic and do some application profiling with a single request analysis there on the left. These are things that a lot of the bot prevention, it's almost table stakes for bot prevention. Then where we begin to do things differently is in the latter 2 boxes there at the top, looking at behavior analysis. What is the attacker doing? Where is the attacker going? Where are they coming from? How fast are they interacting? Are they rotating user agents? Are they rotating their identity, the IP addresses, those types of things? And then you get into the customizable rules, the things that are tailored somewhat to each of the customers, using a combination of the intelligence of the platform, as well as our threat monitoring service that is available as an option. And then the output really is a unique behavioral fingerprint. Now, fingerprinting is a commonly used term, so we probably should have chosen a different name, but the behavioral fingerprint looks at all of the characteristics that you see there listed, and the output is that behavioral intent. Is it legitimate? Is it malicious? And then that behavioral fingerprint is what is used in the policy engine to prevent the attack. So as we identify the attackers through the behavioral fingerprint, and the attackers begin to retool and change their methodologies to try and be successful, the behavioral fingerprint will actually keep track of that movement and those modifications and continue to block the attackers. So it's really leveraging the intelligence of the platform. So key benefits, right? Really trying to stick with the compare and contrast here. So no application integration. We've talked about a few of these things. We'll just reiterate it. No added development cycles. Really, there have been some reports on the stresses on developers, right? The stresses of the shift left movement, where the requirement is to add more security or address more security requirements earlier on in the cycle, which is a great thing, but it's detracting from the developer's ability to create new features and write the code. So along those lines, that is the same impact that implementing JavaScript or an SDK into the mobile device has on the developers. Now, there are those that will say, we can build this into the CI/CD framework and application development framework tools so that it's automated. And I absolutely agree. That would be the ideal scenario. But it still adds cycles to development. It still as new releases come out, and it still adds QA and testing cycles to the already overburdened teams on that side. So, and then the thing that is very important here is that there is nothing there with Sequence. There is no agent on the web. There is no JavaScript. There is no SDK. So there is nothing that the attacker can see from a prevention perspective to try and reverse engineer the defense mechanisms. So that we're essentially invisible. And then, of course, no page load penalties or forced upgrades. Now, the second of the three benefit or three differentiators that I'm going to talk about is consistent policy. Many of you, I'm sure many of you have public-facing web apps that might be susceptible to an automated bot attack. I also think many of you are probably moving towards or have moved towards a heavy use of APIs behind those public-facing web apps. If you're using a traditional bot prevention tool, you might have inconsistent policies between the two. On the traditional web app, you might have a full-blown set of policies because all of the metrics can be collected and those metrics can be applied to the prevention policy in a traditional bot prevention. On the API, as I mentioned, there is really no way to instrument it. Yes, the traditional bot prevention tools do have some API protections. They are not the same as the web side. They are typically more on the volumetric side of things. So I'm not going to say they don't have protection. What I am saying is that the policies that you can apply to web versus API are inconsistent. Not the case with Sequence. Same policy, regardless of whether it's a mobile endpoint, a web endpoint, or an API endpoint. The same policy protection is put in place there. The last benefit is the openness and the extensibility of the platform. So in many cases, you end up having to rely a lot on the traditional bot prevention professional services and access to data, for policy modifications, and those types of things. Yes, you have access to those things, but usually it's a limited access. It all depends on your agreement with the vendor. Not the case really with the Sequence platform. You're given access to the entire platform. So anything and everything on the platform you have at your disposal, policy changes, settings, so on and so forth, even with the SaaS offering. Now, we do have our own professional services where you can engage with our threat monitoring team and our threat analysis team, and they can work hand in hand with you to analyze attacks on an ongoing basis and help you build policies. But you are still in control of everything. You have access to the APIs that I described earlier to pull data in, to improve analytics, and to export data out to perhaps improve the rest of your security posture of your security posture overall, or export the data for analytics, those types of things. So really, it is a very open and extensible platform, and that's very different than what you might get from a traditional bot prevention platform. So let's talk about some wins. So sneaker bots, winning the battle against sneaker bots. So this is a staggering statistic. It'll knock the socks off of most of you if you haven't heard it before. The sneaker resale market, according to Cowen Financial, C-O-W-E-N, the sneaker resale market is expected to be $20 to $30 billion by the year 2030. That's how serious the business is. So we are helping a retailer win the battle against sneaker bots. Before sequence, they were unable to, they had to go to extraordinary lengths to release a new sneaker. They would have to plan it out hours, scale up their infrastructure 10x, all different types of things that really made it difficult for them to release the shoes at any time, which is what they wanted to get to. We are now in place. Because there's no application integration, and we are able to see the bots as they retool. And really, these bots are very sophisticated. And we're using our SaaS model, which really allows them to scale up and scale down very rapidly. So this is a very powerful win and really highlights the power of the platform. Another one is we replaced this is a very geeky slide. Really, the thing that's happening is on the right-hand side. So we were engaged in a proof of concept with a telecom customer, and they had suspected that there was API-based payment fraud going on for more than a year. The incumbent vendor was unable to detect it. In the first week of the proof of concept, or during the evaluation stage, really, we discovered the payment fraud. So the patterns that we discovered are listed on the right. It was suspicious behavior across 3 APIs that was very consistent at consistent intervals, 0, 2, and 7 seconds. On a weekly basis, there was roughly 20,000 unique phone numbers used, all coming from the same 3 zip codes. So those are the patterns that we discovered. And their fraud team investigated it a little bit further. We put policies in place to block it, and they were able to stop the fraud. So very, very powerful use case, and really highlights the nature of the analysis that the product does. And that really wraps up today. If you want to get started, we do have a free trial. There's also a data sheet there that's made available to folks. And I think I'm well within my 20 minutes, or right on the 20 minutes. So, moderator, you can come on back in, and we can start answering questions.
Excellent. Yeah, great presentation, Matt. Really fascinating product. I mean, who knew that the shoe resale market and shoe bots were a big challenge out there. I've seen this personally, just trying to buy like a PlayStation 5 or something like that. It's fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. So, it's really remarkable.
Yeah. So while we do some Q&A, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for everyone out there in the audience. I want to call your attention to the question on the screen. What additional information would you like about the Sequence security solution? And we'll just leave that up. So we appreciate your feedback. Let's see. First question I wanted to ask you, Matt, is about, I'm sure you've heard this one before, just around licensing. What's the licensing model for this?
Licensing model is a tier-based licensing based on the volume of transactions that we inspect. So what we would do is we're only going to be looking at a small subset of your web traffic. We're not going to look at all the traffic. We're going to look at the login, the registration, perhaps the shopping cart, those types of applications. So each of those, we would estimate the volume of transactions that we would be analyzing for you, and we would come up with a number. It starts at roughly 1 million, and it goes up to over 1 billion. We do have some customers monitoring 1 billion transactions per day. So that's how it's try and keep the licensing simple.
That's amazing. 1 billion transactions. Very cool. I'm glad that you keep it simple. That's always good. And then in terms of deployment model, is this something that they would install on premises, in the cloud? Is it a SaaS? How does that work? We can do all of the above. It's a modern modular Kubernetes-based application. So
It can be deployed in a container environment, in your data center, in your own privately managed public cloud environment, and we can deploy it as a SaaS. In the SaaS model, it's a traditional SaaS model. So what that means is we take care of making sure the infrastructure is up and running at all times. We take care of all the updates, so on and so forth. You have access to the policies, the data, the system configuration, those types of things. So very much a shared responsibility model. And right now, the SaaS is deployed on AWS, and and we're expanding to GCP, Google Cloud. And so what we do there is we would deploy an instance in the respective region that is closest to where your applications are. For example, the sneaker customer that I described is in England. So we are deployed in the AWS region. I think it's the Netherlands or one of the EMEA-based regions. So any of those models really work. Right now, the SaaS route is the most commonly chosen for our customers.
Got it. Okay. And then what about industry-specific solutions?
Well, right now we are winning a lot of deals in the retail space. But any industry that has assets of value behind a login page are susceptible to bot attacks. So certainly financial services, retail. I mentioned dating. Yes, there is a lot of malicious bots that are used in the dating world and it's a combination of bots, automated bots, and humans that result in romance fraud, theft of funds, and then social media. So those are our sweet spots. But really, any organization that has like I said, an asset of high value that someone might take and resell or gain value from by stealing it is prime for our offering.
Very cool. And so I'm afraid we're running out of time here in the live Q&A, but I wanted to ask you again about, actually, I'll just bring up the slide. So there is a free trial that folks can try out. What's the process there? Just sign up, and what happens after that?
Yep. The way it works is you sign up and someone will be in touch to get a few additional details on the size and scope of the instance that needs to be built out in the back end, and then we can get started. And then what happens is the traffic we need to work with you to redirect your traffic from your CDN to the Sequence SaaS offering, and then it goes on to its destination. And it can be deployed in an unobtrusive manner, meaning it's just looking and showing the results. And we're not blocking anything. We're not putting anything in line. So if there's a concern about a brand new offering disrupting traffic, we do everything possible to negate that concern.
Excellent. All right. Well, excellent presentation again, Matt. There's a number of more technical questions there still for you in the queue. If you can respond to those folks, I'm sure they appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
For more information on the Sequence security solution, check out the handout that's available there in your audience console. And, of course, visit sequence.ai, and you can sign up for the free trial. All right. So with that, let me go ahead and check on the status of our gift card winner.
And here we go, our first Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Carlos Barrio from Puerto Rico. Congratulations, Carlos from Puerto Rico. Still 2 more gift cards to give out. And, of course, don't forget about our best question prizes that we're doing as well on the event today. All right, and with that, it's now time to introduce you to our next expert presenter on the EcoCast. Welcome, Mr. Steve Hart, Director of Security Product Management at Wind River. Steve, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks for for having me today.
Great to have you, Steve. Take it away.
Yep. All right. Very good. So again, yep, I'm Steve Hart, Director of Security Product Management at Wind River. I have over 20 years of experience in working on cybersecurity solutions, cryptography systems, and other security systems of the like across a number of technology-leading companies. But today I'm going to talk about security for mission-critical intelligence systems. And so on the agenda is a little bit of an overview on the cybersecurity landscape, some thoughts on secure by design from cloud to edge, and I'll finish up with security assurance and operations. So first, assessing the cybersecurity landscape. We live in a digitally centered world where there is a need to have rapid data to support decision making. As the world digitally transforms, new edge devices are connecting and creating a wider ecosystem of intelligent systems from cloud to edge. The ecosystem demands intelligence gathering and automation to derive increasing value from data. And this requires a system-centric view of the world that must support the scalable design process and that accounts for the full life cycle of intelligent systems from an ecosystem containing billions of potentially connected IoT devices. Understanding evolution of technology and the specific functionality becomes increasingly important and critical to ensure that the speed and accuracy of the data is able to drive value to real-time business decisions. All of this requires the full chain of software from boot time to runtime and throughout all workflows within the cloud to edge ecosystem to be secured, really from design and secured also by default. So if you consider new exploits being published every week in various exploit databases on the internet and publicly available, and dozens of new CVEs logged every day in vulnerability databases, really requires a new approach to how we handle cybersecurity in this landscape. So secure by design from cloud to edge. We need to think about identity, authentication, and access management. So whether it's an edge device or a cloud service, how do we identify that? How do we know it's really what we expect it to be? How do they authenticate to each other? How do we authenticate to it and it authenticates to us? And access management. We need these devices to ensure that they are only able to access and perform operations that they are authorized to perform. This brings up the concept of least privilege. It's important when building these systems that they only do what they were intended to do and nothing more. When you add additional access and privileges to an entity or a device or a user, even if they're not intended to use those, now you open up the opportunity for a malicious actor to maybe abuse that device or that account to do things it was never intended to do. So a least privilege model needs to always be applied when building these systems. The software supply chain is incredibly important. As you're using open source or other third-party components, maybe it's freeware or commercial solutions, you need to ensure that all those ingredients that go into the system you're building, whether it's cloud or edge, are still good ingredients. They don't go stale. They don't accumulate CVEs and vulnerabilities over time without having all the patches readily applied to them to ensure they're always in a secure state. Key management cryptography becomes critically important, especially as we had data moving in between communications and also data at rest. Are there any secrets that need to be embedded along the lines for access to third-party solutions or different interfaces? All of that needs to be secured in a vault in a secure fashion so it's not exposed to a malicious actor or the user of the system who should not have access to any types of cryptography or secrets information within the system. Ideally, it shouldn't even be in container environments, right? You shouldn't be storing secrets within a container image. Attack surface reduction, especially in the edge devices, we want to minimize the components that are available for a malicious actor. You want to minimize your attack surface in general. If there are code bases, features, components, functionality that's not needed by the system, it should be removed. That removes the ability for the attacker to come in and use things in unintended ways or to abuse the system. So you want to minimize as much as possible the amount of code that's in the system to only that code that is necessary to perform the function and the purpose of the intelligent edge system or the cloud service. Input validation, critically important to prevent vulnerabilities and weaknesses within a system's architecture. Whether it's a web form or an API to a cloud service or a microservice, or it's some interface to your intelligent edge device. All of the input coming in from users must be assumed to be untrusted. You shouldn't allow JavaScript. You shouldn't allow SQL commands, operating system commands, to come in and be able to be used to perform operations on that device or on a back-end cloud system. These sanitizers and filters must be in place for all input sources to ensure that only expected valid input is being processed by your intelligent edge device or cloud service. Secure by default configuration. So we want to get to a point where by default configuration of a device or a service is secure. All too often there are many different knobs that need to be turned on to make sure security is in place and is enforced. You want to make sure with any knobs that are there, we always have them in a hardened state so the device is in the best security posture as possible. Segmentation, containers, and isolation are very important, especially if you're sharing system resources or in your cloud environment. If there are other applications or users, you want to be able to isolate your data from their data, what your applications are able to process versus what their applications are able to process. And defense in depth. We really need to think about when we're designing these systems about multiple layers of protection. So all these bullet points above need to be considered as multiple layers kind of the onion here to build up an overall defensive depth posture. No one of these controls are going to solve all the problems or be the silver bullet. It's really a systematic set of mechanisms that need to be in place and then a taxonomy of controls that need to be applied to build and deploy a secure cloud system or IoT devices and intelligent edge systems. So, getting more into identifying additional security requirements, a lot of it depends on context, right? Are we talking about building a system for the cloud? Are we talking about building an intelligent edge device? Those are different contexts with different threats that would be applied to them. This gets into your threat assessment process and threat modeling. What are the threat actors? What are the possibilities of things that could go wrong? How could a malicious actor abuse your service or your device or your system in general? Risk exposure. What are the risks of a malicious act? Is there sensitive data that you're trying to protect? Or is the risk of exposure of that data or the risk of a compromise of an endpoint device? If the endpoint device is compromised, can it then pivot and be used to compromise other connected devices or services? Regulatory, industry, and organizational requirements. So your organization most likely has security policies and specific requirements about building intelligent systems or information systems in general. Regulations are constantly evolving and creating new requirements to ensure that safety and security is being considered and built into these devices as they're being created. And different industry segments have industry-specific requirements as well, whether you're in automotive or defense or telecommunications or what have you. IP protection might be consideration as well if you have very important IP that needs to be protected within the system. There are security requirements and controls that need to be applied to that. Anti-tamper and protecting the integrity of the device is one of the threat scenarios that your device could be captured by an adversary. And do you want to prevent that device from being tampered with and having the information that's contained within it disclosed? There's a whole set of anti-tamper controls that need to be considered in that arena around building that into edge devices to prevent tampering, such as secure boot. Can we make sure that if an adversary catches an intelligence system, they cannot boot it with some malicious code or a rootkit? Do we have the right controls and implementation in place to ensure that the bootloader is protected and the images that get loaded by the bootloader and the whole chain of trust that is built up from there to bring the system online is done in a secure fashion with integrity? Data security. So when we think about, again, intelligent systems communicating with each other, cloud services communicating with the edge, browsers and consoles communicating with APIs or edge devices, what kind of data is flowing back and forth in all those scenarios? What are the data flows? How are we protecting that data? Do we have TLS in place and strong cryptography in place to protect all of that communication? What about the data at rest in the intelligence system? Do we have, again, the right key vaults in place and key management to ensure that we can have encrypted file systems or encrypted data at rest on each of those devices or in cloud environments? But there's also data at use as well, especially as we're considering devices or cloud systems where resources are shared. Is your data potentially in memory and being processed right next to another customer's memory who is also provisioning services from the same cloud service provider? How is that protected? Are we considering the proper controls to be in place to ensure that even the memory itself cannot be overrun or compromised by the other customers or other users of the same cloud environment that you're utilizing? It kind of gets into isolation of system resources. If we're sharing memory, CPU, disk, can we ensure that we can isolate those resources so only you or only your system can access the resources that you're provisioning? And system resource constraints. We want to make sure that no one user or process of the system can exhaust all resources. It would be a problem, right, if one application comes up and sucks up all the memory, so all the processes now fail, or sucks up all the CPUs, so everybody else is lagging behind trying to use resources in that cloud environment. Similarly, operating system interface constraints. There's applications running at the application layer or calling into operating systems, essentially RTOS systems, trying to perform different operations within the environment. Those applications should really only be constrained to the interfaces that are necessary to them. If they normally only need to have access to a subset of system commands, then that's all they should have access to. Allowing them to have access to a larger set or all or the complete set of operating system interfaces is a problem, because if a malicious actor is to abuse that intelligent system or that cloud service and do things it was never intended to do, now it has the ability to laterally move or gain elevation of privileges through having the access to additional operating system interfaces. So how do we validate all of this? We talked about security design. We talked about additional requirements based on the context of the system that you're building. And then it really comes down to security assurance and validation. How do we know we built the right system based on all the requirements and the correct design principles? And I'd say it starts with architecture assessment. Can we go back to the architecture and walk through that and ensure that the system that we build actually matches what we designed for and the requirements that we put in place? It also comes down to having a really good security testing strategy. Automated scanning tools are great. There's lots of tools out there. There's both commercial tools, there's open source free tools that you can use. Many tools will give you many different results, and certain tools are stronger at different technologies or different languages or different environments. And so there could be a lot to go through, and it could provide you a very good breadth of coverage by running a good arrangement of tools. I would say to think that any one tool is going to cover them all is probably not enough. It's really more, you have to more think of a toolbox, right? A collection of tools that are going to give you that breadth of coverage across whatever you're trying to build, whether it's an intelligent edge system or it's a intelligent cloud service that you're trying to build. It really, doing things like fuzzing also will give you a really great baseline. Throwing a bunch of garbage or unexpected input to an interface or a form or some APIs that your system has built out. That's a great way to get some good coverage. But really, to go deeper, it requires challenging the business logic and challenging some of the specific functionality that you've built into that intelligent system. And so this is really where manual penetration testing comes in play, where this gets more into going into the deeper workflows of your system and the deeper intelligence of the system that you're building out, making sure that those flows still work. Also goes into ethical hacking approaches. Again, a whole another set of tools around this, which to some extent can be automated, and the automation is great and gives you, again, a very great baseline of security assurance. But to go deeper, some of the challenges is here really with doing the manual exploitation that you would expect an adversary would try to perform against who is trying to attack your system. And then red teaming. This is really about testing your incident response team. If a 0 day is found, if a vulnerability is found that you've never discovered before, how well can you respond to that? How well can your blue team respond to red team exercises? And another way to look at this is, bug bounties. I know a lot of people probably think of bug bounties as a external, you pay somebody to kind of set up a bug bounty for you. I've seen these set up internally as well. It's a great way to continuously test and validate the security of your intelligence system by just keeping a constant tally on and focus on security and security validation and tracking that, and maybe just even creating dashboards that just show, where the problems are being found, who's finding them, and what are the severity of each of those problems. And really, this all builds into the ultimate solution to me for security assurances, which is building security culture. Just this idea that it's really a mindset. All of this is a mindset into how do we regularly think about security on a day-to-day basis as we're building and creating these new security intelligence systems, right? As we're adding new features and functionality, we should be thinking about how can I break that, right? As I made something really cool and awesome, how can I go about also breaking that thing, and what can I do to prevent it from being broken or misused, right? What are the abuse cases? Don't just think about the use cases and testing for the function. Think about testing as the adversary test. And then we get into operations. So once we've designed it, we built it, we deployed it, it's in production, we need to be able to handle the operations of this thing and do the maintenance on it. And a lot of this comes into monitoring. Is anything, strange, or is it behaving differently? Is it in a healthy state? Can we audit the device or the intelligence system to ensure nothing has changed? Alerting, there's anomalous behavior. There's alerting built into it, so somebody can, as an operations center, can be notified that something strange is happening or something that unexpected is happening with the system. A lot of this depends on logging to be built throughout the entire componentry that was built into that intelligence system. And then incident response. Once we've identified that a compromise has happened or something strange is happening, do we have a good incident response process in place to triage that, to evaluate it, and to put out security patches? and are we continually providing security updates to the system as we go to keep up that level of health, that level of security, all the patches that need to be happening, not only to your code and your, the components that you've built into the system, but also all the ingredients, all those third-party components that maybe you use to help build out the architecture of the intelligence system that you're creating. So with that, I'll just talk a little bit about, Wind River. We are recognized as a leader in edge computing for operating system platforms, real-time operating systems, commercial embedded Linux, embedded hypervisors, and safe and secure operating systems. And we also have coming up our first annual Security Summit of 2021, Security of Mission Critical Intelligence Systems. I encourage you all to join us and listen to some of the world's great speakers and thought leaders around security governance, and as they talk about their pathway to building a successful future for intelligence systems that are safe, secure, cyber protected by design. So that's coming up on Tuesday, May 18th, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time. So I encourage you all to register for that and join us for our first annual Security Summit. And that's pretty much what I had. So happy to take any comments or questions that you might have and chat.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Steve. Really appreciate that. Cool stuff that you guys are doing there at Wind River. Let's take some questions now from the audience, and while we do that, I'll just bring up this poll for everyone out there, and we'll leave that up while we do some Q&A. So I encourage you to respond to that. We always appreciate your feedback. Let's see, Steve, first question I wanted to ask you here. Mark is asking about monitoring out there in the audience, and he wants to know who is it that does the monitoring? Is there a dedicated resource? Is there multiple shared resources that do the monitoring? How does that work?
Yeah, so, it depends again on the context of what you're building. If it's a cloud service or you're in a cloud environment, then there's a number of different monitoring solutions out there that can, and new technologies that are out there that can monitor, let's say, for example, a Kubernetes cluster and the different containers that are deployed within it. If we're talking about intelligent edge devices and RTOS systems, some of this comes down to the logging that is built into those systems and, audit records, system calls and logging records around that, and being able to tap into those records and monitor them with different solutions around security information and event monitoring systems and things like that. So there are a number of built tools. There are a number of commercial tools that are available to help with that. There are solutions that are open source that can help with the monitoring as well, or there are custom solutions that can be built from the ground up to help with the monitoring. All kind of dependent on what is it you're trying to build into your edge device.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. This is an interesting question. When implementing this solution, they're asking, what's the biggest challenge that customers typically see?
I think I would say the biggest challenge is maybe, kind of understanding all of the requirements from the beginning. Understanding all the controls that need to be put in place to build the system from the get-go. I would say that's kind of a big challenge. Being able to kind of have that whole blueprint of the architecture, be able to do that assessment and make sure you're not missing anything is probably the biggest challenge which coming up with these systems. So I would say, really good, thorough understanding of the system's architecture and an assessment of that architecture is really critical to do up front because it's so much more costly to after the fact, once you go through the testing or it's in the field to realize that you have some gaps, right? You've missed a key requirement. There's a control that wasn't in place when you originally designed and created an intelligent system.
Great. Yeah, great point. So much of the time, the planning is just so critical ahead of time. Makes all the difference in the end. So thanks for clarifying that one. Another question here, they're just asking for if you have any advice on changing an organization's security policy, especially when development is always under a tight deadline.
Yeah, so I would say, it's a lot of it's around trying to build into the organization's security culture, really pushing security culture within the organization. So it's you don't want security to be this one-off thing that happens in a corner or even like a tax that, we have to go do the security thing now. Really, you want to build a mindset into the organization such that, as we're designing a system, as we're implementing code, as we're testing a system, we're always just thinking about security. It's just naturally kind of like a reflex that we have where, if we design a new feature or function, we need to automatically think about how that thing can be compromised and make sure that we build it in a way that is robust and resilient to attack. Same thing with code, right? If I'm writing code and I know I'm taking inputs, or I know that I'm using resources or interfacing with data, I need to think about what if a malicious actor was able to use this code in a way that I didn't intend them to use it. And I've seen that in many cases where even functionality is provided and all of a sudden customers are using it in a way that it was never designed or created for, right? So you need to think of those things ahead of time, and it's really more of a mindset. And then it becomes naturally just built into the process. It's just part of you creating a new system or part of you testing a system, is that you're not just thinking about testing for the intended use of the functions that you're trying to add to your new intelligent edge system. It's also thinking about how they can be abused and how they can be used in ways that you're not intending them to be used, such that you then build in the right controls to make sure that they're only used for the purpose that you want them to be used for, and that the abuse cases can be avoided, or they can be prevented in that case.
Got it. Okay. Well, it looks like we're starting to run out of time here in our live Q&A session, but I do want to ask you, what do you recommend folks do if they're interested in improving their security posture with solutions from Wind River? What's the best first step?
Yeah, so reach out to us. We have a security assessment practice. We have professional services as well, so we can, that's one of the things we specialize. We can help our customers and work through those details, do a good overview of the architecture, and help fill those gaps and make sure that we're not missing any of those requirements or any of those controls that need to be in place when these systems are built.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks so much for your presentation today, Steve.
Sure. Thank you.
And thanks to the team at Wind River. And I want to encourage everyone to check out the handout that's available there for download in your audience console entitled Software Security Across the Intelligent Edge. Very nicely done resource. You want to check that out for more info on today's topic. All right. Thanks to everyone who responded there to the poll question. We do appreciate that. It's now time to move on to our next presentation. I'm excited now to introduce Katie Wood, Director of Product Marketing at Illumio. Katie, take it away.
Thanks so much for having me speak today, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here. Today we're going to talk about Zero Trust for the endpoints with Illumio Edge and how simple it can be to deploy Zero Trust, whether you're on or off the network, to protect those endpoints that are out there Some of us have been, in the office this whole time. Others are working remote like I am today. As we look down the road at 2021, it's probably going to be sort of a hybrid model with folks rotating in and out of the office. So we'll talk about how whether, your workforce is on or off the corporate network, we're able to have zero trust and get some peace of mind on ransomware and other sort of attacks that can lead to mass infections. If you're not familiar with Illumio, we are an end-to-end segmentation company. We are also the leader in zero trust in the Forrester Wave report. What we do specifically is segmentation. You can see we're protecting some of the world's largest banks, SaaS companies. We have millions of workloads in production. We're best of breed and kind of known for our scale particularly. We have a number of blue chip customers. We've been top rated in Gartner Peer Insights. We are in the leader quadrants for the Forrester Wave on zero trust and also best in class with Deloitte for SaaS companies. So Illumio does cover all 4 areas of zero trust that you're familiar with from Forrester. And what that means really is that we want to assume breach. It's more of an outside-in approach to security. And if we think about how we've been focused on the perimeter, we understand that eventually the perimeter will be breached. What can we do to limit access on our network to prevent lateral movement and that east-west traffic behind the firewall with segmentation and make sure we enforce these privilege and folks can only really access what they need to. So let's kick off. That's the story behind zero trust. And what we're going to talk about today is lateral movement and how we can prevent it, either for folks who are working from home or when we come back to the corporate network or if you've been there the whole time. What we know is in many of the breaches we hear about in the headlines today, it only takes somebody clicking on a phishing link in their email to bring an attacker some piece of malware propagating from one endpoint to the entire enterprise. It only takes a matter of seconds to take down many endpoints, thousands as we saw with NotPetya and WannaCry, and by the time the attackers get back to the data center and cloud, you could be looking at a crown jewel attack or getting to any of your high value assets. Why do we need zero trust for the endpoint? Well, we've all made investments in our existing security stack and everything's doing its job, but we can still be exposed. Let's take a look at an average work from home remote employee. Could be me even, but this one's named Bob. Bob's going to log on through VPN. He gets authorized access by NAC, and once he's on the network, oops, he did it again. Bob clicked on a phishing link. As it turns out, it's going to be a zero-day strain or a modified strain, something that hasn't been seen before. And because of that, even though Bob's got EDR on his machine, it's not a recognized piece of malware that's out there. So it's just going to be monitored for now. It'll pass the antivirus check. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for EDR to detect it, that malware is going to spread over peer-to-peer ports, RDP, SMB, to any other connected laptops. VPN doesn't really limit any access in most cases. It's just going to give you access to the network generally. So that's where it's important to have a zero trust control in place to limit that lateral movement and make sure you can prevent that traffic. In the meantime, eventually EDR is going to pick up on the new strain. Bob's posture is going to change for his endpoint and he'll be kicked off the network by NAC. But that's just a little bit of an illustration about, even with all of the controls we have out there today, why zero trust is still important to lock down any lateral movement and prevent mass infections. There's a few ways that folks do this today. One is through group policy object. If you have a Windows machine, you can manipulate the firewalls on your laptop yourself. It's difficult to do that at scale if you're an IT department. We've seen folks outsource it entirely offshore because it is such an operational burden, but you can do it through group policy object. Another way folks try to do it often is through NAC. Cisco ICE, Aruba, ClearPass, Forescout. The issue that you run into with NAC for endpoint segmentation, it's great at device management, device admission. When you get into endpoint segmentation, folks bite off a little more than they can chew. You may be starting with just the license, but soon you run into capacity limitations. It may only support 250 different tags for groups that are going to get policy, and that's not enough for some organizations. Soon you run into hardware upgrades. Maybe the open standard isn't compatible with your existing hardware. When you flip the switch, and this is common with zero trust, there's been a lot of trepidation about going into enforcement because you don't have visibility. You're not sure what traffic flows are going to be blocked. Big problem with NAC. And then at the end, you may be spending $1.50 on every dollar in professional services. At the end of this, if you do have folks working from home and doing VPN, it's probably not going to be effective off the network. So This is, why there are easier approaches out there. And I would say specifically, when you try to do this through the network, it's easier to decouple security from what you're doing there, because the network, as we know, is really meant for connecting things. And when we're doing segmentation, we need to limit access and isolate them. So you're really kind of working at cross purposes. It's easier to do it off the network. That's why we made Zero Trust for the endpoint simple with Illumio. Zero touch to the network. You're able to enforce at the edge. There's no hardware upgrades required. It's a SaaS-based solution. Really painless policy model. We use build, test, enforce. So you're not going to have any kind of business disruption from blocked flows, because you'll be able to see what they're going to be before you go into enforcement. It gives you a quick time to value, no kind of disruption with your existing solutions like VPN. Lightweight and out of sight, I'm running it right now. We do use an agent, but it's more just like an antenna. We're not doing any kind of deep packet inspection. No sign of it for users, and there's no kind of load on the business. As I mentioned, it's cloud-based and network agnostic, and that's really the benefit that you get over trying to do this with NAC or a different kind of hardware-based solution. You get a lot more versatility working on and off the network, and some of those projects, it's difficult to do deployment and reach the finish line. So just real simple deployment I'll get into in a second. So with Illumio Edge, what we really designed it to do that you can't do with other tools is, number one, easily allow your endpoints to talk between business apps and be able to get to access what they need to. And then default deny everything else for simple zero trust. So you're going to have outbound allow, it can talk to anything it wants to, but inbound deny on the peer-to-peer ports, like I mentioned, SMB, RDP, which is how most malware propagates today. And that allows you not just to look backwards at, what's this applied to previously with threats we know about, but even zero-day threats. Most of them are going to propagate through your peer-to-peer ports, so you can just kind of future-proof everything. If you have EDR, about half of the folks we surveyed recently are using EDR. It's a great tool. We have a strong partnership with CrowdStrike. But it is reactive threat detection, as we talked about. It relies on time to detection. It's not going to be kind of a default control to prevent anything. But it is effective and a great tool to have in your tool belt. What Illumio Edge brings to complement that is containment by default. So your first infected endpoint is really going to be your last one. It just limits the scope of mass infections, to the original patient zero, and prevents any kind of time to detection that can just really balloon the size of a breach, as we saw with NotPetya and WannaCry. So how does Illumio Edge work? Well, first it allows you to pick list apps to apply policy, or you can configure your own. You see we have peer-to-peer apps there, SMB, RTP, WM. There. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and install the VEN. That's our virtual enforcement node, just a very lightweight agent, more like an antenna. And what that's going to do is send some of the telemetry and context down to the policy compute engine, which will help you easily test and enforce the policy. You'll be able to see everything's turned to red and green, but before it gets into that, there is a test mode, and the PCE pushes down security instructions just through the cloud. All the enforcement is done on the Windows filtering platform inside your Windows endpoint. So you're really enforcing closest to the edge, closest to what you need to secure. It's a great security model in that way as well. You're not, securing back at the network somewhere. As I said, the VEN is going to push down context and telemetry, and that will give you a view of what's happening and visibility into other activity, what's hitting it off the network. You get a lot of great visibility in Edge. Folks use it for troubleshooting, see a new exploit on Hacker News and just look at that port, see if you're getting unnecessary activity. We were kind of surprised when we dog-fooded it here in Illumio and were able to see all this activity that I was getting on my home network from my Amazon Fire Stick hitting my endpoint. So as with our other products for the data center and cloud, you see a lot of unknown unknowns, which are interesting, and it gives you easy troubleshooting. But I digress. If you want to limit your endpoint estate, we also have a partnership with CrowdStrike. You're able to use your existing Falcon agent to deploy Edge. We are in the CrowdStrike App Store. Go there and get a free trial. It's going to work the same way. The Falcon agent just kind of distributes the endpoint telemetry. You get the same Illumio interface. Our PCE in the cloud is going to be pushing down the security policies, and they're just orchestrated through the Falcon endpoints on your existing the existing Falcon endpoints you have. So Illumio really offers this 1, 2, 3 deployment to zero trust. We make it simple. I know when I've spoken to our own IT department, they mentioned when they tried to do it previously, it sounded too good to be true because you're working with the networking and infrastructure team, trying to flip the switch on your NAC deployment with Cisco ICE maybe, and as we talked about before, you don't have any visibility into what's going on to see what's going to be blocked. So Illumio worked really hard to make zero trust simple and fast to get into enforcement. Just step one is activate your Illumio Edge SaaS. You can do that through the App Store with CrowdStrike if you'd like. Then you define your incoming services and custom rules. We have a pick list. Finally, you deploy the VENs. You can do build, test, enforce, and then just monitor from there. I've spoken to folks who took only a few days or even a few weeks to get into enforcement. You're able to see everything. We didn't have any kind of business disruption when we deployed it here at Illumio. So it gives you that quick time to value because you know there's very low risk of anything going wrong. If you want to learn more, you can find us in the CrowdStrike store. There's a free trial there, very simple consumer-like experience. You can also learn more on our product page, illumio.com/product/edge. We have some videos. I believe you can get a link to the survey I've been talking about. A lot more information there, and you can also contact us if you're interested in learning more about Edge. With that, I think we're ready for the Q&A.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Katie. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up our poll question that we always do. I want to call everyone's attention to the poll on the screen. What additional information would you like about the Illumio solution? So with that, let's see, let's kick off some Q&A here. First question I wanted to ask you is, this one comes from David in the audience, who's asking if we can use Illumio and firewalls together, or would this replace a firewall?
No, you can absolutely use them together. This is just working with the firewalls in your Windows laptop. We're going to bring MAC compatibility later this year. But the most restrictive rule wins. That's how it works. So absolutely, there shouldn't be any disruption with your other tools out there.
Got it. Okay. And then next question, they're asking, what are some other threat actors using for similar techniques to the ones shown that Illumio can help mitigate? Not sure if that one makes sense to you or not.
Oh yeah, I mean there's a ton. We just did a webinar with CrowdStrike and they were talking about Wizard Spider. A lot of these exploits are named after like anime characters or video game characters. So they're kind of, they're a lot of fun, but they're difficult to pronounce. Another one is REIC. It's distributed by a trick bot. And as I was saying, like most of these propagate over peer-to-peer ports, going back as far as like WannaCry and NotPetya and even to current day. So REIC and Maze, these kind of ransomware as a service attacks are a lot more prevalent today, and that means, you know, not just that it's going to lock up my machine and I'll lose my endpoint, you know, big deal, maybe a couple $100 or $1,000, like they're able to exfiltrate data, and then, you know, they can either ransom that and say, listen, we know this data is valuable, you don't want it exposed, you don't want people to know you're breached, you're going to pay this much from the California Consumer Privacy Act and GDPR, 4% of your revenue per year. So that's why we've made your ransomware, you know, $7 million. And if you don't pay the ransom, we're going to make an offer for like Lady Gaga or Donald Trump to buy it on the dark web, buy it now through Bitcoin. So, you know, whether it's like a simple kind of malware or even the ransomware as a service things that we use today, like it propagates the same way, and Illumio Edge is effective against it.
Very nice. And then there's another question here about a VPN. They say if we're using a VPN on our endpoint, do we still need this type of edge security solution?
Yeah, most VPN isn't going to give you any kind of access control. It gives you access to the whole network once you're dialed in, and it's really effective at that. But you need to have more kind of zero trust access controls once people do get on a flat network, just to prevent that east-west traffic. I don't want to name names about some of the breaches we've seen in the news, because a lot of times those folks will end up being clients someday. But lateral movement is how a lot of breaches become those mass infections and are the most damaging.
Okay, good to know. And then what about They say here, beyond ransomware protection, how is edge visibility used to help understand traffic that's off the campus network?
Yeah, well, I talked a little bit about, being able to investigate by port, by service, by user, and just kind of drill into what the activity is. We have a sort of a map that gives you volume of traffic, and you can slice and dice to focus on, port, user, and drill into things. So you can sort of grab and group and see who the top talkers are, what they're using, if there's anything funny. You can look at a port, like I was saying, if there's an exploit on Hacker News that's attacking one of your ports, you can go in. You could integrate with SIEM and source systems to set up, alerts and notifications to let you know when something weird is happening. But you'll also just kind of find out unknown unknowns. Some devices are really noisy, like my Amazon Fire Stick. So people do all kinds of things with it. It's pretty powerful.
Very cool. And then there's a question here from Pablo who's asking about implementation. What's the implementation like when you go to deploy this?
It's typically days or weeks. You just have to install an agent on the endpoint. Then you'll checklist what traffic, do build, test, enforce to see if anything looks like it's going to be blocked, and then go from there. I was interviewing a customer. We always ask about getting to enforcement if they encounter any problems, and they said they did get one, and I said, oh, did you use build, test, enforce? And they said, no, we didn't want to. So I think if you use build, test, enforce, you're able to see everything that's going to happen, but if you like to live dangerously, you can always make your day more fun.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm afraid we're running out of time here in our live Q&A, but, final question. What should folks do to get started with this solution? Is there a way to do a POC? What do you recommend?
Yeah, just get in touch with us through the website. You can reach out, and we'll set you up with a call, and you can go to a POC. You can also do the free trial through the CrowdStrike store if you just want to check it out that way. Very consumer-like experience. Just kind of buy it now.
Excellent. Yeah, I just brought up that slide here on the CrowdStrike store. That's very cool. You can go there and check out the Illumio Edge solution right there in the CrowdStrike store. So very cool. Thank you for sharing this innovative new edge security solution with us. Great to have you, Katie.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
And thanks to the Illumio team as well. Check out the handout that's available there in your audience console from Illumio. It's Illumio Edge Endpoint Zero Trust. And of course, thank you to everyone out there for all the questions. I'll leave up the poll question while we announce our next prize winner. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Hakan Lundholm from Minnesota. Congratulations, Hakan Lundholm from Minnesota. Still another gift card to give out on the event today, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. All right, and with that, it's now time to introduce you to our next presenter. Welcome, Pawan Shankar, Director of Security Product Marketing at Sysdig. Pawan, it's great to have you on again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I will start my screen sharing, and let's get started. Okay, so today we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the next generation modern cloud applications and really thinking about the security of both your cloud and container infrastructure in your environment. So as we think about this modern cloud application stack that's emerging, what I often hear from customers today is that they're moving pretty quickly to building their applications on containers and Kubernetes and running these applications in the cloud. As these applications are being built, they're using tools like CI/CD tools there, and then they're running them as these containerized microservices across multiple cloud providers. Right? And what's really nice here is that because they're adopting this open standards approach of Kubernetes and open containers, really this gives them the flexibility of being agile with their deployment. They're not locked into any specific vendor. They're building on an open standards approach, which they really like, and the fact that it's extensible and that they can really leverage the power of hybrid cloud and really achieving the agility there is something that customers are starting to build on. We're also already seeing that Kubernetes has won the war from an orchestration standpoint, and it's become kind of that de facto standard for orchestrating your containers in your cloud or on-prem environments. And as we think about this modern, application stack, as we talked about just briefly here, running these on containers, Kubernetes, maybe EC2 instances or VMs in the cloud, serverless functions. But the heart of it is that this core compute layer is frequently interacting with multiple cloud services, right? You have your S3 buckets, your object storage services there, blob storage for Azure, your databases like RDS, networking and security tool, resources like load balancers, VPC, security groups, management services in the cloud if you're using CloudTrail, CloudWatch, other Azure activity logs and so on, as well as other messaging queues and other services. And really the problem becomes that you need to think about the risk across both the container infrastructure and the cloud environments. And what cloud teams and security teams are looking for is a unified approach to managing the risk across both their cloud posture, the infrastructure, as well as the containers running on top. And as we think about the risks, across both of these environments, let's dig into them in a little bit more detail. So on the workload side, things to watch out for. Obviously, the first thing is vulnerabilities, right? These could be OS, non-OS vulnerabilities running in your container images, and you want to catch them ideally pre-deployment. So embedding scanning into your CI/CD pipeline or your registries to scan them before you even push it to production. But also, if there are new vulnerabilities, detecting them at runtime and flagging them to the right app or dev team. And then expanding on that runtime side, really being able to detect these threats running inside your containers and your workloads. So someone spawning a shell in the container, modifying a binary directory, or really performing malicious actions, having the ability to detect that is important, as well as having a detailed audit record in the event that something goes wrong, and you want to be able to have a full forensics evidence even after that container is gone. And on the cloud side, oftentimes the problems are typically, number one, discovering what assets are even running in your cloud environment, right? Customers always just want to understand what's running in my environment. Are there any misconfigurations tied to those assets, S3 buckets that are exposed, security groups that are public, right? And also just identifying any risky behavior across cloud accounts, users, and services, right? So if someone logged in without MFA, tried to delete a CloudTrail rule, or tried to access something from an S3 bucket, and really understanding the activity that happens in your cloud. And oftentimes the source of this data is these activity logs like CloudTrail or GCP audit logs. So being able to ingest those, analyze those, and really give you the full continuous cloud security is important. And then finally, compliance. Oftentimes compliance is the biggest blocker because that's the box that these teams need to check off before going to production. So meeting compliance standards like PCI, SOC 2, NIST is important. And the common challenge here today is that customers often have different tools to address both of these environments and the security of these environments. And this siloed approach of using these point products doesn't really work because you have all these different pieces of the puzzle in different places, but really what these cloud security teams need is to bring all these different pieces of the puzzle in a single place and see all these events in a single timeline to help them detect these threats and respond to them faster. And as you think about these breaches, right, it's really important to start taking these seriously now because on the cloud security side, we already know all these different attacks that have happened, right? Credit card applications were hacked at Capital One, Facebook user data was exposed, Tesla had, a crypto mining incident a couple of years ago where, a Kubernetes dashboard was exposed. So all these different attacks have happened, and primarily the main reason for these attacks are customer misconfigurations and mistakes, right? Human errors that often lead to these exposures in the cloud. And with Gartner, I think there was a statistic that said that now almost 99% of breaches in the cloud are as a result of human misconfigurations. So being able to catch these, potential misconfigurations across cloud and container environments, detecting threats at runtime, and then if something did occur, what happened? Having that, incident response framework is really important because these attacks are here to stay. And security teams need to be able to have a framework and a plan to respond. And as we think about this, right, this journey, what's really becoming clear to many customers is unifying the threat detection and response, right? So on the cloud side, what Sysdig is able to do is really detect these threats and investigate suspicious activity across your cloud, accounts, services that are running. And then on the workload side, being able to detect threats at runtime based on the syscall data that we collect, Kubernetes audit log information that we ingest to be able to tell you who did what in Kubernetes, so the user level there, and also other capabilities around network segmentation, rapid response. But really the benefit here is three key things. Number one, we're consolidating this visibility for you, so giving you that deep visibility across both the cloud and container security events in a single timeline. And then, having a single event store. This is really critical because, I was talking to a customer recently, and what they really liked about Sysdig is having a single place where they can query events from container and cloud environments and use the context from both these environments to define very precise policies to catch misconfigurations, threats, or other violations that, across these environments. And then finally, having a common policy language. So building on our open source tool called Falco that we donated to CNCF. Falco is the de facto standard for runtime security, and it's the tool that, the language that customers can use to detect threats across cloud and container environments. Rather than having to learn multiple different tools, you have a common language that's built on open source. You get all the benefits there from the community to really build on a standards approach to detect threats and reduce the time it takes to catch these threats across both cloud and containers. And as we think about this, the idea of this open source security that I just talked about, we talked about Kubernetes and Docker containers and all these new paradigms that are being leveraged to build modern cloud applications is really on an open source stack. But security is also following suit, where you have tools like Falco we talked about for runtime security. You have OPA for policy governance. You have Envoy, STO, for service mesh. All these other tools that are there for you, and really the pace of innovation in security can only keep up if you're building on this open source security stack, right? And the benefit there is that you're standardizing, number one, in an open source based approach. So this open standards gives you the flexibility to not be dependent on a single vendor or a proprietary tool for your security policies, rather than having that flexibility of the open standards approach, where if you ditch that vendor, you still have the investment protection in the community and the open source tool there. And second, transparency, right? If you don't understand how a policy is generated, you can look at the GitHub code base and understand exactly how these rules were created. You don't get that flexibility and that visibility and the transparency with a proprietary tool. So really, this allows you to actually have faster innovation in security and keep up with the pace of security, or with the pace of application development, and ensuring that ultimately security is not slowing you down. Right? So rather than consolidating different tools, you're building on an open source stack that gives you the maximum coverage across both cloud and container environments. So really, with Sysdig, you're unifying both these workflows around cloud and container security built on this open source stack, where we're providing these several use cases around container and Kubernetes, image scanning, runtime security, incident response, as well as monitoring and troubleshooting. So really the full stack of use cases for containers and Kubernetes to securely run your applications. But also on the cloud side, managing postures, so cloud security posture management, understanding those misconfigurations, detecting threats in the cloud, and conducting incident response, as well as monitoring your cloud environments, your cloud services like Lambda, serverless functions, Fargate. All of that can be done as well. And then finally, compliance is something that we help you meet with out-of-the-box compliance checks for PCI, NIST, SOC 2, and so on. And then let me pivot and talk about a customer example here, because I always like to tell stories, and this is a good one where this customer is a financial services, kind of a digital payments company, and they came to us a couple months ago looking for, primarily threat detection in the cloud to be able to spot, that malicious activity happening in their AWS accounts. And they wanted to really build on these AWS native services. So they were using CloudTrail, they were using CloudWatch, Security Hub. So they wanted to basically supercharge those services and build on top of that. So what we did was provide these out-of-the-box threat detection rules that ingested CloudTrail logs that they were using, but also built these policies based on the open source Falco engine. So that way they had the open standards approach there. They understood exactly how these policies were created, didn't have any vendor lock-in, which is really important for them, and then able to detect these threats pretty quickly because we were able to curate it based on the open source policies. And then we also mapped it to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So their CSIRT team here that was primarily driving this use case were able to bridge the gap between their cloud infrastructure and their security use cases and workflow, and better speak the language between the DevOps team and the security teams by being able to standardize these policies on MITRE ATT&CK framework categories like privilege escalation or lateral movement. So anytime a cloud threat happened, they could identify immediately that this was a privilege escalation threat and conduct better incident response for their SOC teams and CSIRT teams there. So that was really a beautiful use case for them to detect threats in the cloud, building on their CloudTrail logs, as well as sending these events to Security Hub, and just improving their overall workflow for threat detection in AWS. And just to summarize here, before I just quickly show you the demo, again, SIG is a secure DevOps platform covering several use cases, but at the core, built on an open source security stack, providing deep visibility across containers and cloud to detect threats, respond to incidents, understand compliance challenges, as well as respond to performance issues as well. And then finally, making it really easy for the customer, simple to run installation model to get started in minutes, and ultimately giving you the security for containers, Kubernetes, and cloud environments. So now let's jump into the demo here that I'll cover quickly here. So as I log into my screen, what you're seeing here is a macro level view essentially across both cloud and container environments. And what's really nice here is, for a specific cloud account, you can see all the events on the right-hand side here across CloudTrail logs, misconfigurations, as well as workload events, and then see them in a kind of a risk-based chart here. So the red signifies high severity, orange is medium, and low is yellow. But if I zoom into a specific region, I can go down and actually zoom into that specific region, go into the specific service like EC2, and actually see exactly what the events occurred on this service across my different environments here within this region. And what's nice is you can see things like someone, logged in, potentially deleted bash, right, and actually got access into the workload and was able to mine Bitcoin, for example. So you're able to see the full stack, right, all the way from the login via MFA. You can see who logged in, what happened, see the actual trail of activity, and really catch things like lateral movement that's happening across cloud containers. And then you can filter on these and get more granular as possible. But just to show you a quick flash here of all the types of events that we capture, give you that chronological view, and also tell you if something malicious happened, it's violating compliance standards, it's violating this MITRE ATT&CK framework that we talked about, really giving you that full picture for the security team. And several of the use cases here, so we just covered cloud and container security as a kind of an overall view, but the ability to see your image scan, image scan results, both in the CI/CD phase, in the runtime phase, in the registry. Will give you a nice UI to give you a full view of your vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, compliance checks as well that allow you to understand the compliance posture, the security posture of your cloud environment, your container environment as well. And then on the runtime side, the ability to be able to see all these different policies all out of the box here for you to detect threats at runtime. These are all based on Falco. And what's nice is, again, you can sort them by different filters. So if I sort them by AWS, I can see all these different policies that we have out of the box, tagged to different frameworks, just making it really easy for the customer to start detecting threats across hosts, containers, Kubernetes, all these different environments. And then you can also enforce more specifically network segmentation to really enforce, first of all, gain visibility into your network traffic that's happening across your Kubernetes environments and your clusters. My demo environment is a bit slow here, but you can basically see just in a moment here, just a visual representation of the traffic that's actually happening, in a specific cluster in Kubernetes, all the way down to a namespace or a service here, and I can actually go in and see this from a cluster operator's view and a cloud, DevOps team's perspective to understand what's the traffic and easily apply least privilege policies on ingress and egress to enforce that segmentation. And then finally, in the event if something does occur, we give you a full audit trail of exactly what happened in your environment. And this is really unique because Statistic is the only tool that can do this in Kubernetes today to give you this detailed incident response, even after that container is long gone. So you're able to see if someone attacked your cloud, logged in, via misconfiguration, got access to a workload, okay, what did they do? And we can actually tell you that this user logged in, ran bash, curled down some URL, and, potentially did some suspicious file activity. And even after this container is gone, you have this full audit trail here. So really powerful, giving you that full visibility across cloud and containers, securing your infrastructure and your cloud workloads, and really helping you maintain that security posture in your environments. And it's really easy to get started with Sysdig. So all you have to do is, I just kind of flashed through this pretty quickly, but if this is exciting, all you have to do is just go to the website and you can click Start Free, and then basically choose your journey, and you can start the trial here and actually play with the product and understand exactly how this is working with a 30-day free trial. And that's it. That's it for my presentation. And I will take any questions that are coming up.
Yeah, great presentation. I really love the demo there. Thank you for taking time to share that with us. It's a very visually appealing user interface. I really love that. So that's cool to see. So we do have some questions for you from the audience. And while we do that, I'm just going to bring up the poll for everyone out there. What additional information would you like about the Sysdig solution? And so let's see. First question I wanted to ask you, Pawan, is around how does Sysdig manage my cloud security posture? Would you say it can fit into that entire cloud kind of policy framework, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's two parts to it. It's really simple installation process to secure your cloud and manage the cloud posture. We have a simple cloud formation template that you can run, and that automatically installs all the key capabilities for you. So it's a single line install. And then once you have that, we out of the box have these policies to check your static configuration. So your configuration in your AWS accounts based on the CI's benchmarks. So that gives you that report there that you can track on an ongoing basis, as well as the insights view that I just showed, which kind of unifies with that bubble chart and giving you that full timeline view. All that is pushed to you, and you can see all the events that are coming from CloudTrail logs, from your misconfigurations, from your, on the posture side, as well as workload events if you have an agent running, and see all of that right out of the box.
Nice. And then what about sensitive data? If you have sensitive data that this is looking at, is there a way to protect that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the key advantages for us is all the processing that happens in the cloud, for your cloud security, happens within your cloud account. So for example, with CloudTrail, we ingest those logs and it lives in your cloud account. So there's two benefits there. All that sensitive data is protected, and you're saving costs that are tied to exporting those logs to a security vendor or tool outside of your cloud account, right? You have to send it to a SIEM tool or some other tool. That incurs costs. So all this ingestion and analysis happens within your cloud account, and only the metadata and the results get sent back to Sysdig. That happens on the scanning side, so your images and contents are safe. It happens on the cloud configuration side and the CloudTrail side, so your logs and your sensitive data are protected. So key advantage there. That is part of the simple installation process that I was talking about earlier.
Nice. And there's a question out here. They're asking if there's a free demo available of this, or what's the best way to do a proof of concept?
Yeah, great question. So again, just go to sysdig.com and you'll see a start free button. And then, if you thought this presentation was useful, and you want to kick the tires and play in a seat for yourself in action, I would definitely recommend starting a trial. It gives you the flexibility to see the entire product in action and actually understand all the use cases that we have, which is quite a few. So definitely encourage the audience to play with that.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our Q&A here. There's a number of more technical questions for you in the queue, but that's all we have time for. Pawan, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And for more information on Sysdig, visit sysdig.com. I see right there, I'm looking at it right at the top right, says start free. There's also a get demo button you can push as well. So make sure that you check that out and try out this solution for yourself. Again, don't forget about the poll question that's on the screen. I'll leave that up while I announce our final gift card winner. This Amazon $500 gift card is going to Felix Cordona from Missouri. Congratulations, Felix Cordona from Missouri. Of course, we also have our 5 Amazon $50 gift cards to give out for our best question prize winners, and we will be contacting those after the event today. Again, don't forget about the poll question. We appreciate your feedback on that, and make sure you visit sysdig.com for more information. And with that, it's time to wrap up today's EcoCast. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media 10 on Tech podcast. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming EcoCast or MegaCast event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And I hope to see you on another upcoming EcoCast happening on May 5th at 12 o'clock Eastern, supporting data and analytics infrastructure, tools, and strategies that drive innovation at your company. On that event, you'll hear from Faction, Atempo, Gigamon, and potentially some other experts as well. So hope to see you on that event happening on May the 5th. I hope that you enjoyed today's EcoCast on comparing traditional versus next-gen edge security solutions. I learned a lot. I hope that you did too. And we'll see you next time. Have a great day.